In the beginning, there was no sound, only the void. And God said, "Let there be sound."
Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you.
And the voice of man rang out, and voiceover was born. And God said, "It is good." Talkin' Voiceovers with Rick Sellers and Wes McCraw. The big podcast where we talk all things voiceover. And now, Rick Sellers and Wes McCraw.
Stardate 74573.4. Voice actor Kay Bess is the voice of the computer on the television series Star Trek Picard, streaming on the Paramount Network. She's provided voices on the television series Cleopatra in Space. She voices Cow and Phyllis in Doug Unplugs, plays Ida on Kaipo in The Age of Wonder Beasts. Kay voices Bellroc on the animated TV miniseries Wizards, Tales of Arcadia from Guillermo Del Toro. She's voicing characters on video games such as Lara Croft, Rise of the Tomb Raider, The Last of Us Part 2, Crackdown 3, Fallout 76, State of Decay, and Them's Fightin' Herds, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the bridge of the Enterprise. Please welcome Kay Bess. Kay Bess, how are you?
Hi.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm well. How are you?
Good. How's your day going?
Good. Busy. I started with early sessions this morning, so.
We're giant Trek fans, and when I found out you were the voice of the computer, I'm like, yes!
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast Talking Voiceovers. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm Rick Sellers, the voice talent.
And I am Wes McCraw. I'm an engineer and producer here at Primo Demos, and thank you so much for doing this. Very cool.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and I have friends near and dear to my heart that are from Cleveland.
Oh, very awesome. Cool. Including probably Townsend Coleman, who is
Townsend Coleman, and then also Steve Mackle. Do you know who Steve Mackle is?
I do. Yep.
Yeah. He's just a dear heart. Yeah,
good.
I've known both of those guys forever, and they're both Cleveland guys. And
I think Dave Fenoy is also, at least he spent some time here in Cleveland. So yeah, very cool.
Okay, yeah.
Anyhow,
fantastic.
Yeah, let's
good
find
people there from
very
Cleveland.
good people.
Yeah.
We have a good pool of talent. Let's find out a little bit about you.
Okay.
Tell us where you grew up and where you went to school.
I grew up in Southern California, in a little town called Goleta, California, which is it's this sort of the sister city. It's right next door to Santa Barbara, California, which is a little bit better known than Goleta, because Santa Barbara is a very rich tourist town, right? It's like rich with people and culture, and also money, but that's what I meant, right?
Mm-hmm,
so, but Goleta is home to UCSB, that UC Santa Barbara, right? So that's in Isla Vista, which is a beautiful campus of the UC school system. So, and so I grew up in Goleta, and then I traveled south 100 miles, and I attended USC in their Bachelor of Fine Arts theater program, which I did not graduate from, but I attended for 2 years, and then sometime later, like maybe a decade later or so, I ended up at UCLA studying philosophy.
Wow. Okay.
So those are the two. And I didn't graduate from there either. I have a lot of units, but I don't have a degree. But so I studied theater and philosophy.
Very good. Yeah. And when you took theater there, so you learned a little bit about the craft of acting. Very cool.
Yes.
Excellent.
So before we go any further, let's just put the disclaimer out there that we're recording all this and we're going to edit it later and just put the cool parts in. So if there's anything that you say in the course that violates any NDA or anything weird to say, don't put that in, and we'll just cut it right out like it never happened.
Like a surgeon, we'll snip it out.
I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer.
Very skilled surgeon.
So we know where you went to school and where you grew up. How did you get into acting and voiceover?
Well, when I was in Goleta, when I was growing up, I was a singer, and so it's such a small town, and I recorded for some songwriters there, and recorded at this one particular studio. At the time, it was called Spectrum Sound, I think, and now he's changed the name of it, but it's still the same engineer, still the same place. And I did some demo singing for some songwriters, which turned into, one thing leads to another. And then I did some demo singing for a couple of local advertisers. And inside of that, there was this little voiceover, in the little donut hole, as they used to call them, right? Where the copy goes and you talk about the product, and then the jingle begins, then you talk about the product, and then the jingle ends. And so that's where I really, really first started doing voiceover. And I didn't really even know it as such. It was just, I was singing a jingle and they asked me to read something. So it didn't really register to me that it was something that people do for a living.
Yeah, that seems to be a really common theme. I know a lot of the voice actors that we've interviewed say that they just sort of fell into it. They didn't realize it was a thing or a career choice.
Yeah, exactly. So then, cut to going to USC and studying theater. And when I left theater there, I left rather abruptly, just because I was, it sort of turned out that my experience, I was like one day in the first couple of days of my junior year, I look back now and I realize I had a panic attack, and I just had to get out of the class and off campus, and I never went back. I mean, it was such a strange happening, right? But after that happened, I was waiting tables and, kind of trying to figure out what to do with myself. And I saw some advertisement for a voiceover workshop, which, just was really, really rare. And I remembered, I was like, oh, I think I've done that. I did that in Goleta. Maybe I should try that, So I signed up for this class, and it was on a Saturday afternoon, and, there was a casting director who was running the thing. And we read copy, and she sort of taught us what it was. I mean, we were being recorded on reel to reel.
I remember it.
And
I remember it well.
Yeah. And so then she took those tapes home and I guess listened to them over the weekend. And she called me the following Monday and said, I think that you would be really good at this, and I think you should pursue it. And she recommended a class to me, which was the only teacher in town, who was Tom Pinto. And so I took a class from Tom. And after I took that class, he goes, I think you should just make a demo. So he helped me make a demo, and I sent it out to 3 agents. And William Morris called and said, we'd like to represent you.
Wow, that's a big deal right off the...
Yeah, it was crazy. And then a month later, I booked my first job for Mitsubishi. It was which at the time was a brand new car company.
Wow, you just jumped right to the front of the line.
It was one of those things the name is Mitsubishi. It was such a funny little spot, and really that, that's how it happened. And it was very, looking back on it, I realized it's kind of storybook, but at the time I was like, okay, I'll do that. Sure.
Were you in the union at the time?
No, I wasn't. It's funny. I had dated this guy who ended up producing a show. I don't know if you would remember it, but it was called Amazing Stories, and it was Steven Spielberg. Yeah. So I remember talking to my friend John. We dated for a minute, and I asked him, and he was one of the executive producers of the show. And I said, John, I really need my SAG card, and I'm wondering if there's a role for me in the project you're working on. I have never been so bold in all my life, right? But
sure.
Why not, And he was like, sure, I'll see. I think we have one more episode this season. I'll see, right? So the next day I get a call from the casting at Universal saying, we'd like for you to come in and read, for this thing. I'm like, oh my God. So I went and I read it. It was for the role of a nurse. The episode was Dorothy and Ben.
Well, now I have to look it up. I have to see the episode.
There. You can find it.
I'll find it.
It's on YouTube, I think. And I play a nurse, and I had one line, and
wow.
But I'm all through the thing, right?
That's great.
I'm in every scene in the in the operating room and it's so funny. But in the final version, my line was cut.
Oh,
so I have a couple of reaction shots and things like that. But that's where I got my SAG card.
That is so great. Wow.
It was so crazy. But I got my AFTRA card, which the unions were separate at the time. But I did, in fact, get my AFTRA card with that Mitsubishi spot.
Yeah. Was it a national spot back then? Do you remember?
It was radio.
Okay.
And so I don't remember if it was just like Southern
Regional
California radio or if it was national radio. That part I don't remember. I'm not certain.
Either way, it got you into the union and you began your career. Well, let's
exactly.
Tell us about some of the major brands that you've done campaigns for, television stuff, television and radio.
Golly, I
read your IMDb. It's huge. So you don't remember them? Well, it was a while ago. So, it's been a minute.
Well, I mean, do you mean like things with regard to commercials?
Yeah, television spots.
Okay, yeah. So I did like Jergens, lotion. Do you remember? Do you remember the Later Gator?
Absolutely.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did. Yep. I did a couple of those. They didn't use one female exclusively, but I did a couple of them. And oh my God, something I'm probably not supposed to talk about, but I don't think it really matters anymore. I did a spot. It never aired, but I did a few spots for Apple when Apple had the PC guy and the Apple guy.
Oh yeah,
remember them, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that was such a great campaign. And there were a couple of spots where they had a disclaimer, and they had the voiceover of a disclaimer for the PC, right? Which was just like all these things that it's like, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. Right. Like all that in comparison to the Apple product, which was like, we're easy and we're perfect, kind of thing. And it never went to air. It was just like, it killed me.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
tough.
Killed me because it was just so fun. And I got to be on set for that. So they actually, it was crazy.
That would have been a great gig.
For a few years, I was the voice of Hyundai.
Oh yeah.
Well, Jeff Bridges was the image voice of Hyundai for a few years. And before it was Perry Gilpin, I think is her name, from Frasier, right? Mm-hmm. She was the image voice. And then I did all of the dealer spots across the country. So Perry Gilpin was doing the, all the beautiful image kinds of spots. And I was doing the, come in by Labor Day and get 3.99 APR financing on a brand new Hyundai Sonata. That was the stuff I was doing.
Sure.
But I did that for 2 years, which was just one of the best campaigns I ever worked on. It was really so fun. The other thing I wanted to tell you, oh wow, I hope I don't forget. Okay, so this was so funny. I was leaving. I did a spot for Clear Blue Easy pregnancy tests, right?
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
And I used to, this was like in 1997-ish, somewhere around there. And I used to sort of describe myself as, and I still kind of do, as someone who, I just am kind of a blue collar voice actor. It's not like I'm famous, and it's not like I'm an animation star, and people don't know me by name, and but I work, and I'm on the roller coaster. It's like I work and then I don't work, and then I work and then I don't, and that's how it is for anybody in the business, unless you are in the rarefied air of having, being on Futurama and The Simpsons.
Which would be a great
and
gig.
That's not me.
Right. Well,
so I used to joke, that like I'm not I have to figure out another way to be remembered, because nobody's going to remember me for some Clear Blue Easy spot that I did, and then after I said that once to someone, I went and looked up Clear Blue to see if the Clear Blue Easy spot that I did way back then was like on YouTube, So I go and I look at it, and sure enough, like there's the spot. Like, how could it be that this spot would be available, right? And I look at it, and there's like so many comments and so many views. It just doesn't make any sense, right? And I'm reading through, and I'm like, oh my God, this commercial was directed by David Lynch.
Oh wow!
No kidding.
And it was really weird. It was
that's Lynch.
weird.
Lynch is a weird director,
right? And he was in the height of his movie making and in Twin Peaks, and
wow.
And the I think it was the girl who played is it Laura Palmer?
Laura Palmer,
Laura Palmer,
yeah.
right? So, and I think she was in it. She was
wow,
on camera,
that is a trippy
actress in it. And so, sure enough, it's like, well, maybe I will be remembered for my Clear Blue Easy spot,
Well, we know who you are, so there you go. You're special to us.
So, it's a really, if you look it up, it's if you look up David Lynch, Clear Blue Easy,
I will definitely do that.
And my voiceover is really weird, and the spot is really weird.
What's weird about the voiceover?
Given the time, the era, it was really flat and really like emotionless. And
you were directed that way, or that was your take on it, or how did?
Yeah, I was directed that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and now it would be like, well, that's how everybody's directed,
Yeah,
but
the conversational.
Given the time,
read.
and it's almost flatter than, I don't know. I find it very weird.
We have to look it up.
The whole thing's really
Yeah, I've got to look up your Amazing Stories episode and the Clear Blue commercial and check that out, especially directed by David Lynch. I love the movie Dune that he directed. A lot of people don't like it, but I think it's a cult classic. And Lynch is a weird cat, but visually a great director.
Yes.
I remember I had to see Dune because I was a huge Police fan at the time, and Sting was in it. And I'm like, I have to go see Dune because Sting's acting, so.
Yes.
But,
he was
so
great.
let's switch gears just for a second. I wanted to ask you about your home recording studio. That's my expertise, and I wanted to see what what kind of gear you're working with and your process, if you get auditions and what you do.
Yeah. So I live in a 2-in-1 apartment in South Pasadena.
Mm-hmm.
So like I share a wall, with a neighbor. I live not far from a grocery store where there are a lot of giant trucks that pull in and back up.
Nice. Wow. How are you
the entire block? And
how are you possibly being able to work with all that kind of low frequency rumble?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I feel like there's an angel on my shoulder because it's never been an issue. And even though, like, there are times, certainly for auditions, I go, okay, I gotta wait for the beeping to end.
Oh man!
Exactly. Oh, it's just crazy. My neighbors are fabulous. There have been a couple times where and they have 2 young kids who normally are in school, but not during COVID, right? So they're at home. So they're fabulous. If I have something, they're very kind and accommodating, which I really appreciate. But but I'm constantly, I'm contending, right? I'm contending.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people are contending with that kind of thing, right? I have because I don't want to, I don't have the space to get a whisper room of any kind. I just don't have the space to put one, but I don't really want one. I mean, I look forward to the time when I will have a house of my own and I'll have a dedicated place and I'll deck it out,
Sure.
But at the moment I am in the hall closet, which sits in between the 2 bedrooms, my room and my daughter's room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sound treated. It's not soundproofed. And it's one of those things like, all right, I'm recording. So everybody quiet,
Right.
It's like, in session flashing red light,
Right.
And, I work on a MacBook Pro with an Apogee Duet,
Okay.
Which I love very much. And I use Twisted Wave is my software. And I have 2 microphones. I have a 416.
I do too. Love it.
Yeah, which is really, it's great for a circumstance like mine, right? Because it's narrowly focused. And then I also have a TLM 103, which I actually truly love that microphone for my voice. Like if I, one day I might get a U87.
Yeah.
But that would be almost a different lifetime. But but I love it. And I love the similarities that, it just, for my voice, it picks up right in the sort of the sweet spot of my voice. And so I will use the TLM 103 for animation reads, for video game reads. But it does pick up the whole bloody neighborhood, right. So I have to be smart about when I use it. But I also have a couple of stacks that I use to, that I run on my sound files, which Bo Weaver, who's a promo guy, he helped me with, right?
Okay,
I sent him some files and he sent me back a stack. And so I use that. And that's really helpful if there's a little bit of noise here and there. It just does a really nice job of cleaning up the file. But for the most part, I'm just really judicious about when I record, and when I schedule myself. Like I had a session this morning, and they're on the East Coast, and it was like, well, I can go 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And I know that that's a quieter time of day. Like if I would have scheduled it later, I would have been contending with a lot more noise. And so it's like, okay, I'll just get up earlier for a little quieter slice of the morning,
Well, you got a nice setup and some nice microphones. People ask me all the time, I do some tech sessions and consulting and stuff like that. What kind of mic should I get? Well, it depends on your voice. Sometimes you want to match the microphone to the voiceover, and sometimes you have a different mic for certain things. They sound different, but
and I feel like that for me, that's like a luxury. Like I bought my TLM 103 from a friend of mine who didn't want hers anymore, and so I got it at a great price, like half price essentially. Awesome. And I was like, I'll do that, and honestly, those 2 mics, they're just the mics that I have been accustomed to using in studio when I go to sessions outside of my house. And so that's what's familiar to me. And I know there are a boatload more mics out there.
A ton of them. Depending on your budget and price range. I mean, you can.
Yes, there's so much available.
How long have you had a home studio setup? Did you have to do it for the COVID thing, or did you have a setup before that?
Long before. I've had a home setup since 2004.
So you were way ahead of the game. There's a lot of established guys that did not have a home studio setup. And when the pandemic hit, they really had to learn and jump and figure out, how do I edit? How do I record?
Yes.
Bob Bergen was one of them. We've interviewed him on the podcast too, and great guy. But he had to learn how to do it. And
I think, Bob does so much animation, and animation has always been out at a studio. Yeah. Whereas through my career, I have done a lot of promo, and promo, I think, is where it all began with home studios.
That makes sense.
It began with the trailer guys and the promo guys, where they were needed so quickly, so fast, so immediately that they, Don LaFontaine he was so busy. He had a driver. Yeah. Like pre-studio, right? He had a limousine. I think he had two limousines. Wow. I think he had. And he just was like being driven from one session to the next. And he'd get his copy and he'd be working on the copy while he's in, like going to the next session. And Don was really, I feel like, the guy who who just created the whole home studio thing. It started there, then Joe Cipriano, Townsend Coleman. It's like everybody began to build on that. And once that started, everybody just stepped up, and certainly as a female, if I wanted to be viable in the realm of promo, I needed to be as available, So I was like, okay, I'll do it.
Well, you did it.
You stepped up.
I have to ask you, since the pandemic has hit, how has that affected your voiceover business?
I feel like voiceover is, it was strangely something more productive, but advertisers still had to do their job,
Right.
They still, and they had to, companies really had to sort of keep themselves in the eye of consumers, and I feel like there was this huge wave of COVID related spots, right? That just came through like
challenging
it was insane.
times.
Yeah, exactly. Alone together, like all these, right? So there was that initial wave of additional commercial stuff that happened. And those of us who had studios that were ready to go were just like, we were there, and so we could rise to that need, and then slowly but surely animation and video game houses realized like, okay, we can still do this. Right. We're accustomed to having voice talent in with us, but we don't have to, not really.
Sure.
And their editing guys could certainly be anywhere, and so they started to check. All of a sudden, voice actors were getting these requests like, "Tell us your studio specs." Right? It was a part of the audition process.
I had the same
thing. You want me to read
thing.
on this, but we need to know your specs, and then they would test it. Right? It's like, before we hire you, we're actually going to test it. We want a sample. We want your noise floor, your room tone. We want all that stuff, So in a certain sense, 2020 hit the voiceover world the least of all in the realm of entertainment. I mean,
that makes sense.
We carried the union through, VO people did, through 2020, because everything else was shut down.
Very good.
So,
And how do you connect remotely? Do you have ISDN? Do you use Source Connect or?
I have IPDTL, and then this was sort of funny, right? Like at the beginning of all the pandemic stuff, everybody was like, "If you want to do commercials, you have to get Source Connect." And I was like, "I don't need Source Connect. I have IPDTL. I have IPDTL, and I have ISDN through IPDTL. So really, I have to get Source Connect." I mean, I was, and then it took me a week, and then I realized, just get the flipping Source Connect. Just like, get it. Like, what do you're gonna turn down work? Like, because people are like, no, we really want to connect through Source Connect.
Yeah.
So I got Source Connect.
Yep.
So I got it, and that is how I have connected all through.
Very good.
Is by Source Connect.
Both of us have it as well, and we actually had Robert Marshall on, who is the founder of the company, who created the software. Super talented guy, but
he was a good interview, except about maybe 5 minutes in, he started speaking a different language about coding and the whole thing. I just zoned out. I tried to be involved, but it was like, I don't understand what you're saying.
It got to be like Trek babble, like Trek techno talk on the show. So
it's true. It's a good analogy.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because my experience with Source Connect was from 2005 when it was
Brand new.
Not reliable.
Yeah, it was brand new,
and
I think.
it was difficult. So that was my initial response. Like, well, I don't want to get that. That's not very reliable. Right. And then I talked to some engineers here, and they were like, no, they've improved. Kay.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what
it's
Mr.
gotten
Marshall
better
said.
in 15 years. So, and I haven't had any issues with it at all. It's been very easy.
That's what Robert Marshall was saying was when, they were all sitting around on a typical day at work, nothing really going on. And then like the next day, they couldn't possibly, or hiring tons of people, they couldn't keep up with all the demand for Source Connect. And
every voice actor on the planet had to be able to connect remotely. And it's a good option because it's really inexpensive. I mean, you can buy it outright for like $600, so it's a deal.
Exactly.
So
so if you use it for 2 years, it's paid for.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I think it's 30, 35 something a month if you opt to go monthly. But I'm like, I should use it for longer than 2 years.
Anyway, you have been working as a pro voice actor for 30 plus years. You voiced spots for major brands, television promos, animated series, and video games. What's your favorite VO genre? What do you like doing the best?
Oh, it changes. Honestly, it changes. There have been times where I get commercial auditions in and I go, I don't want to read commercials. I want to do animation. I'm going to focus on the animation things that come in. And I'm like really intensely into those. And then those become very exhausting because they take a lot of energy. And I kind of go, I just long for a commercial, the simplicity of a commercial. And so then I'll do, and then I'll be in that phase, and, but I will say this, the common thread is really great writing. Mm-hmm. That's what I love. I love really great writing. And you can do a commercial that I've done some commercials that I have found just like they move me, they're so beautifully written.
Sure.
And I'm a lover of words. And so I just, when something is stated so well, so beautifully with this crazy language of ours, I love that. And it's the same with a character in a video game or in a piece, with an animated character. And it's the same with narration, even, if you're really telling a compelling story. Again, to me, it's all about the writing. I love all of it, and I'm grateful for all of it because I think it's what's kept me sane for all these years. Everything is different. Every job is different. And if it were the same thing all the time, I think I'd go crazy.
Yeah, I understand.
So it's really the writing. I love them all. But
Gotcha.
I think it's the writing.
Do you have a favorite character that you voiced out of all the things you've done?
Wow, that's that.
I hear the Clear Blue Easy's pretty cool. Well,
I loved doing Anna in The Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Oh, okay.
Because she is so complicated.
I loved Richard. I would have married him if he'd asked. But he was a broken man. I don't want to see you end up like him.
She was sort of intrinsically a good person, but had cancer and was looking for a cure for her cancer. And in the process of that, would do anything to get the cure. And in her willingness to do anything, she began to do bad things. Right.
Yeah.
I find characters like that really interesting. So I really liked her. And I play a character in the animated series Kipo and the Wonder Beasts.
Oh yeah.
And I play a goat.
Get your up to 88 degrees and measure.
Then drain in the curd, and then you add the coagulant, test for gel firmness, and cut the curd.
And that's when you put the herbs in.
Nice. Do you have to make the goat sound?
No, we didn't have to. We didn't have to make goat sounds. I was sort of like, there were three of us, and we're older. We're like older.
Yeah,
we were like the Golden Girls.
Exactly. We had Chris Anthony Lansdowne on the show, and she talked about that. She said she did her
Chris
character.
Chris and I were goat sisters together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Wow.
So that was really fun because I got to be sort of not very bright, I was the dim-witted goat. Like my two sisters were much smarter than I. So that was really fun. And then, doing the ship and Picard. And it's not so much that is, it's not difficult for me. It's not, but I'm just so thrilled to be a part of that franchise.
Engaging auto evasion protocols. Shield strength at 89%. Weapons online. Routing additional power to thrusters. Routing additional power to inertial dampeners.
I know you're a Trek nerd, and so are we. So, yeah, that's when I found out you were the voice of the computer on Picard, I'm like, oh, that is awesome. I've got to ask her about Trek. And that's my next question. You voiced the computer on Star Trek Picard. We're both giant fans. Do you have a favorite Trek series? I know you've seen Next Gen a lot and Voyager.
So well, Next Gen was my entree in to the Star Trek world. Aside from watching a few of the original series when I was a little kid, but I didn't get into it. I didn't. I was just my older brother was into it, and I would see a little bit of it and leave. So I watched Picard. I watched Next Generation. I started watching the series. I was not a first run girl. I started watching that series in around 2003, and I watched it as reruns, obviously, on BBC America.
Yep.
And they had them like every day, and it became this thing where I would turn it on while I was cooking dinner. And it was, my kitchen was set up where you could kind of see into the den from the kitchen. It was an open kitchen. So I would just like make dinner and watch Star Trek. And my husband at the time, he's the one who turned me on to it. Like, you might like it. I was like, Star Trek, please. So I started watching it, and then I just became enthralled with it, particularly with Data. And the arc of his character, and then Picard, and then all of them, really, it's like you get to know all of these characters. And I watched it over and over and over and over. I watched Star Trek Next Generation every single day for a decade.
Awesome.
And I have seen every season multiple times. I just put it on while I'm cooking dinner. I put it on my iPad, and it's there, and I don't even have to be in the room to know what episode it is. I can just hear it and be like, yeah, I know that. And then I'll just start talking the lines out loud. I know the next line that's coming. Like, oh,
that's cool.
All of that.
I mean, it's cool to me.
And then, it's great. And then a couple of years ago, I started watching Voyager. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in the same realm with that now. So I go back and forth. I'm in a Voyager jag right now. So I've watched Voyager each season multiple times, and I just watch it over and over. And then I went back during COVID upon the advice of a friend who was like, you must watch the original series. And I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
I just can't. And then I did. And aside from the first part of the first season, right, which is just goofy, right? But they're all that way. Mm-hmm. I love that. I loved it. And again, it's one of those things like, you really start, it's like, it's the OG. It's like you get Spock,
really
and you get Kirk, and you get their relationship, and you just, it's the history unfolds, So
it's kind of the Holy Trinity. You got Captain Kirk, the man of action. You got Dr. McCoy, the emotion, and you got Spock, the logic. Together, they make one character, really, and they just kind of split them up, and it's a great formula.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I have my I knew you were coming, so I had my my Trek cup there. I don't know if you can see it, but
so I can. A friend bought me La Sirena Picard wine glasses.
Oh, nice.
Now, is that the name of the computer on the ship, or is that the name of the ship?
It's the name of the ship.
I kept trying to find, is there a name for the computer, and I could not find one.
No.
So you're just a Starfleet computer. Very cool.
It's the name of the ship. So like Majel Barrett is the voice of
in the original
Enterprise.
Series and in Next Gen. And then I think once she passed away, I think it got passed over to other talent. But
she did TNG and she did Voyager and she did DS9 and I think she's in there. And there hasn't been another Enterprise, right? That like so the next voice that came in was Julianne Grossman, I think, for
Enterprise or. Because there's an Enterprise series with Scott Bakula, and I don't know who the voice of the computer is on there, but
wow, see that's a series I don't know. I don't know that one.
Got moments.
So I'm unclear.
It's got moments where it's okay. It could have been a great series, the beginning of Warp Drive and Starfleet, but they kind of missed the boat a little bit. But I digress.
Well, the most recent one on CBS All Access, which I guess is now Peacock, I think they're calling it.
No, it's Paramount. Yeah, the new one. Yeah, CBS All Access. Yeah. Star Trek Discovery.
Yes.
Yep.
So that computer, that's not, so the voice of Discovery is Julianne Grossman.
Okay.
And then I'm a voice of
Star Trek Picard.
La Sirena. Yeah.
How do you like Discovery? Have you watched it?
I have.
It's darker than regular sort of Roddenberry Trek, but it's also got some interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, it does. But I'm a really open-minded Trek person in that, Star Trek to me they've always been kind of cutting edge, and they've always challenged, certain traditions
Gender,
and stuff like that, and so
social stuff, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like every series that's come out has kept up with that part of
challenging the social norms and stuff. Yeah,
and I know there are different timelines and things get a little screwy in that regard, and a lot of people don't like that, and they feel like it's sort of moved away from the original canon, and all of that. But I'm kind of like, it's really interesting. I find it all. I buy the different timelines.
Well, you're totally a Trek girl.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh yeah,
the timeline thing doesn't bother me at all. I'm totally cool with all of it.
Yeah, same. I just find it really interesting, and I love the space travel, and I love the. I think a piece of it, the on a more philosophical level, I think that the thing I love about it is that it's a very hopeful series.
Yeah,
that's
the thing,
and
that's the main.
Yeah, and certainly with TNG and Voyager, which are my two favorites. Everything for the most part, there's a problem. And there are trials and difficulties, but everything wraps up, and everything, all's well that ends well.
Yeah, it's a happy ending.
And
that's television.
We live in such a strange time, that it's very soothing to me. It's very hopeful and sort of like I can go into my Star Trek world and sleep well at night.
Have a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
I totally understand what you mean. Rick does a great, yet maybe somewhat offensive impression of
Kate Mulgrew as Captain. Captain.
Kay Bess, I'm so happy to see you. I love you as much as I love 7 of 9. Oh.
I apologize for that.
No.
I had to do it.
So great.
We should get back to you.
Yeah, we could totally go down the Trek rabbit hole for hours. Trust me on that.
We should have a separate podcast, right?
Yeah. Trek Talk.
Yeah, Trek Talk.
Talking Trek with Kay Bess.
So, you do both a VO blog and a VO podcast. Tell us about both, please.
Yes. My podcast is called The Beehive, and it's women in voiceover. So I interviewed women in voiceover, which at the time, I started the podcast because things were kind of slow for me, voiceover work as it goes. And I felt like I need to do something, and I need to connect to my people. And I was thinking, there are so many women that I know who work all the time, and you just don't know their names.
Right.
You don't know who they are, and And sometimes, again, you might know somebody's name if they work in animation or if they have a prolific video game career, but not people who are on the air every day doing promos and affiliate work and commercials. And, and I just thought I'm going to interview them because I know they're all interesting people, and they manage a lot, a lot of them have kids and have to juggle all of that stuff. And it's like, how do you do that? How do you make your way through a career?
It's
doing
a challenging
all of that,
gig. You got to be a mom. You got to be a business person. You got to be your own agent. You have to be the talent. Sometimes the engineer. It's a lot of work, but I know most everybody just because I'm friends with them all on Facebook so
exactly.
it's kind of neat that we have a community that we can kind of interact with. Let's talk about auditioning. Are you auditioning every day or for the most part of your day?
I by and large, I audition every day. Yes.
Okay. And how much time are you spending per day on auditions? I mean, you spending in...
That will vary depending upon the type of audition that it is. I tend to be much faster. I mean, it makes sense that you would with commercials and with promos, because they're shorter scripts.
Right.
And all of that. And because those are the two genres I have worked in the longest, it's pretty easy for me, and I'm very clear about what I do well, and my agents know me very well. And so I get stuff that makes sense for me. And
Gotcha.
I don't, with regard to commercials and promos, I don't have to orient myself to something new, so it's pretty quick. But once you start throwing in video game and animation auditions, then things can slow down because it might take me, if I have an animation audition where there's singing, if I have to sing.
I've had the same issue. Yep.
Yeah.
You have to be able
I have to sing to a track.
Yep. You got to hear the music and you got to do the character and you have to sing it well. So
yeah, all that. And Twisted Wave is not meant for that kind of auditioning. So I have to open up GarageBand, which I don't know at all. And so
it's tricky. I've used it. I'm not a fan.
But edit, and that is so time consuming. So that could take me, one audition could take me a couple hours. That's happened before.
Yep.
So
it's time consuming sometimes. So
yeah, it really, really depends. But I try if I'm really on my game, I try to get to them as soon as they come in.
Yeah.
And when I don't, like I missed things this morning from Friday that were due this morning. And I didn't get to them over the weekend.
Well, you can't get to everything. I had one that came in today, but I don't have time to do it. So I'm going to have to pass on it.
It's true. I think that is like one of the most important things for voice actors to know is that you can't get to everything.
No, and you're not meant to do everything. If it's really not for you, if it's spoken word and they're looking for an African American, you're probably not going to get the gig. You may as well pass on it. On the video game stuff, have you had to do the grunts and punches and, I've had to do that and it's really annoying. How different can you sound when you're being punched or throwing a punch? You know what I mean?
Right?
It's like,
that's interesting because for me, it's like, what's the difference if I'm stabbed or shot? Like that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, because it's almost like when you're throwing a punch, it's a right?
An
it's
effort.
It's more out. When you're receiving one, it's like, it's back, right? It's not forward, it's back, right? So, I did, I was one of the core players in The Last of Us 2.
I think Dave Fennoy is in there. I think he's a major character in that. Yeah.
He could very well be.
Lee, I can't remember the last name, but something.
It was, that was brutal. Like I worked on that for 2 years and I wasn't even a main character.
Wow.
I was a core player, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the game a lot, but I'm not a primary, I'm not a primary character. And that 2 years of doing that, which was so much death and dying in so many different ways, like it took me probably 7 or 8 months before I could sing. Like it trashed my voice.
I didn't think of that, but I think that's true.
Yeah. Well, and some people are built for that kind of stuff. That like they're actually, just how their vocal cords are built and everything. Like Fred Tatasciore could do that all day long, and he's fine because that's how his voice is built.
Well, he's the voice of the Hulk, so in the cartoon stuff. So
and I'm not built that way, and so since that game, I have become very particular about what video games I do because I really can't. I don't want to destroy
strain
my
your
voice.
vocal cords.
Right, that's your how you make a living.
You've done voices for both animated series and video games. Is there a difference in terms of acting styles for either media?
Yeah, I think that by and large, video games are really, really, really naturalistic. They're really real.
So it's
a much
story.
Subtler approach.
And sometimes you get a pretty meaty role that's well written, and you can really sink your acting chops into that. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Good.
Like that was the sort of joyful part about doing The Last of Us 2, because it really required some acting skills. You really focused kinds of stuff. And animation, even though animation has become a bit more realistic, it still is a little broader. Sometimes it's really, really broad, but it's less like it used to be. It's all more realistic than it used to be, I want to say. But you still have to be believable. You still have to establish really believable relationships.
Right.
That I think is what makes animation really good, and what makes an animation actor really good is that even though they may be silly, they may be ridiculous, they may be outlandish, they are true. Like they are true, and the relationship that they have with other characters is real. It's a real, true relationship. So it comes. Those even animation characters kind of come from within. It's not something you sort of put on. It's not a mask. It's something that you reveal. So I think that that's the real fun complexity of animation. How do you be outlandish and truthful all at the same time?
Well, that's a great point. It's a good insight.
Yeah.
For those listening who would like to get into voiceover, what advice would you give them?
Oh, I think it depends on where you are and what kind of voiceover you want to do. And I think to be clear about that is really important, because there are a million ways to have a career. So what kind of career do you want to have? Do you want to do narration, e-learning, corporate stuff? Like that is something you can do from home and you can do without an agent. And there are, a myriad of ways to begin to cultivate that. Do you want to do animation, video games? Those are still going to be central to LA, even with COVID, even with protocols having changed. There are enough places, enough studios that once most of this has lifted, will want to bring their talent in, right?
Yeah.
So that's imperative if you want to do that. Commercial, it's wide open. Like you can be anywhere to do commercial voiceover. I always think that some kind of training or understanding, at least, of acting is important to pretty much every genre.
I would agree.
Not because you have to be some great film actor or stage actor in order to do voiceover, but you have to understand that it's not about the sound of our voices. It's about connection to people. It's about relationship. It's who am I talking to? It's the use of your imagination in creating a scenario in your head to make what you say make sense. So it's not about sounding beautiful. And so how many times have we had people come up to us and say,
a million
people
times.
People tell me I have a beautiful voice. And
I'd like to get into that voice acting thing of yours. How do I do it?
Yeah. And that is, do you have to have an interesting voice? Yeah, I think so. I think, but there are all kinds of interesting voices.
Absolutely.
So there's not one type of interesting voice. There are some kinds of voices that don't have a good sound print. plain and simple. Not everybody can do voiceover.
True.
But just because you have a different voice doesn't mean you can't.
Yeah, you can learn how to use what you can do and do it better. Before we let you go, is there anything that you want to plug on social media, your website, anything like that?
Yeah, sure. Well, you can certainly find my work at kbess.com. Mm-hmm. And then I'm a VO coach, and I kind of specialize in commercial, but also in kind of career coaching, and I really sort of like to think of myself as being an encourager, more than a coach, right? Like, because I do think that people who do voiceover, I think a piece of the struggle that we all experience these days is being alone, being isolated in our booths, and we get very, very little feedback. And when we don't get feedback and we don't understand why you've read 100 pieces of copy and you still haven't booked anything, and you feel like, oh, am I good at this? Do I suck? Like what, and because we're so disconnected, it's really easy to develop imposter syndrome, to think that you suck, to think that your reads aren't any good. And that so many times that is just not the case. And so I really love to be able to encourage people and remind them that, it's like I can do 1,000 auditions in a year, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people do a lot more than that. That's about my average, 800 to 1,000. And I don't book most of them.
Right.
I don't book the vast majority of them.
It's very challenging.
And I can be, if you're shortlisted for something, it's a huge win, even if you don't book it, right? We never know if we're in the top 10.
No,
if you're in the top 10 out of 300, that's a win.
Yeah.
And so that's a piece of my coaching that it's really what I love most about coaching, is to be of encouragement to people who are talented and are looking for a path, and all of that. So you can find my coaching at trustandbebrave.com. Trustandbebrave.com.
Okay.
Very good. Well, before we let you go, as I told you earlier, we'd like to have you give us a close as the voice of the computer.
I'll do my best. Thank you for listening to the podcast Talkin' Voiceovers with Rick Sellers and Wes McGraw. I'm Kay Bess, going where no one has gone before.
Boom, one take. Nice.
Very good.
It's like I'm trying. I wish I could recall. I wish I had like Star Trekkies that would just like pop out of my mouth,
Yeah.
But it's like, talking about engines going down and this, and,
right.
Well, you could say warp core breach in progress or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I could. You want me to say that?
Maybe you can if you want. Do you want to thrill us? Give us a thrill?
Sure. Okay. I will. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Warp core breach in progress.
Oh, you made my day.
You don't know what that means.
Kay Bess, you rock, and we can't thank you enough for being on here. We'll send you a link.
I have one more.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Food replicators are offline. There.
Man, girl.
Good one. Good one.
That is, you are awesome sauce. So thank you so much. And when this is all edited and streaming, we'll send you a link so you can check it out. Okay. And we're going to add the computer effects under your voice and give you some treatment so it sounds like the computer on the ship.
Yeah, we'll do some post-production and make it even
It'll
more
be
cool.
fun. It'll be really cool.
Fantastic. Good.
All right. Well, I wish you much success and hope everything in California opens back up before too long.
Yes. Thank you
so much. For being our guest.
Okay, thank you very much.
You guys are great.
We'll see
I appreciate it so much.
All righty. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Wow, she was just incredible. What a talent, and what a really good person. She was very kind and wow.
Yeah, very genuine.
Yeah, and she just gave freely of her time. I mean, we could have talked to her forever about Trek.
Oh, absolutely. I was geeking out.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage anybody out there that needs a female voice talent, contact Kay Bess, because Kay Bess is the best.
I see what you did there.
All right, man. We'll see you next time when we have our guest, Larry Kenney,
yes,
the original voice of Lion-O, Lord of the Thundercats. That's right. Thunder, thunder, Thundercats, ho!
Bye-bye, folks.
I'm Samantha Fagan, and you're listening to Talkin' Voiceovers. Be sure and subscribe to Talkin' Voiceovers. Hit like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Before you book your next voiceover demo, check out primodemos.com. You'll hear the difference.
Thanks for listening to Talkin' Voiceovers with Rick Sellers and Wes McCraw. Find us on Facebook or on the web at primodemos.com.